Good afternoon and welcome to today's ASPPH Presents webinar, Everything You Wanted to Know About Applying to ASPPH Fellowships. Good afternoon, my name is Monica Statler and I am the Director of ASPPH Graduate Training Programs. So during today's webinar, we're going to share information about fellowship opportunities at two federal agencies, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Then we plan to provide an overview to the application process. We have allocated time at the end of the program for questions and answers. In addition, we are joined today by two of our fellows who we've asked to share their personal experiences in their fellowship positions. We'll have joining us today Edward Lowe, who's currently an ASPPH Fellow assigned to the EPA, and Ms. Mariah Scales, an ASPPH Fellow who's assigned at the CDC. Also presenting today will be my colleague, Erin Williams, Senior Manager of Program Services. Before we start, a few housekeeping details. At any time during the webinar, you can type your question into the questions box, which you can find at on the toolbar at the bottom of your computer screen, as shown here. We will address all questions during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Now to begin. The Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health, known as ASPPH, is the voice of accredited public health education. We represent schools and programs accredited by the Council on Education for Public Health, or as commonly referenced, CEPH. ASPPH is pleased to partner with federal agencies, including the EPA and the CDC, to offer public health training opportunities for students and recent graduates of our member schools and programs. Now, you might ask yourself what distinguishes the ASPPH training programs from all other fellowships out there. First and foremost, with over 35 years of training program experience, ASPPH provides highly respected and recognized mentor training programs specifically aimed at fostering the growth of early career public health professionals. We have time-tested relationships with federal agencies that are involved in public health, such as CDC and EPA, as well as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA. The performance of our fellows speaks for itself, as a significant number of our program participants do go on to become full-time employees or contractors at the host agencies. In addition, as an ASPPH Fellow, you become part of a network of over 2,300 ASPPH Fellowship and Internship alumni who are currently public health leaders in private, nonprofit, academic, and government organizations. Wherever you are in your career, you can always contact ASPPH and ASPPH Fellow and Intern alumni for networking, advice, and support. ASPPH offers public health fellowships, which are long-term training assignments that are typically 1 to 2 years, and in some circumstances, 3 years. Fellowships are open to recent graduates, defined as students who will have received a master's or doctorate degree by the start of the fellowship, or alumni who have graduated within the previous 5 years of the start date of the fellowship. Applicants' degrees must come from an ASPPH member institution. During this presentation, we will focus on fellowship opportunities that are scheduled to begin in the summer and early fall of 2021. To reiterate, to be eligible for ASPPH fellowship programs, applicants must have received a master's or doctorate degree from an ASPPH member, CEPH accredited school or program of public health. The graduate degree must have been earned prior to the beginning of the fellowship and no earlier than the previous 5 years. Now, we're often asked if you must have an MPH degree specifically, or if it's okay to have an MSPH or MHS. The answer depends on where you got your degree. If you attended an ASPPH member School of Public Health, then any graduate degree received through the School of Public Health is acceptable. If you attended an ASPPH member Program of Public Health, only those degrees which are accredited by CEPH are eligible. and this varies by program. The same principle applies to doctoral degrees. They must be from an ASPPH member, CEPH accredited school or program of public health. All applicants for ASPPH fellowships must also be U.S. citizens or hold visas permitting permanent residence in the U.S. For international students who are on today's webcast, we suggest you check out your school's Career Services Office, as well as the ASPPH website, publichealthjobs.org, to find opportunities for which you might be eligible. You may also research opportunities available directly through the federal agency in which you are interested. Fellowship assignments are 12-month placements. Some ASPPH programs offer extensions for 2 and possibly 3 years based on the availability of funding at the host agency and the satisfactory progress of the fellow. Fellows receive a training stipend, an allowance for health insurance premiums, and in some cases, a travel and training allowance. The stipends and allowances vary by program and fellowship location. All fellows are required to establish goals and objectives that they will accomplish during their placement. These goals and objectives are established in collaboration with host agency mentors and are reported to ASPPH at the beginning of the fellowship. Fellows then report to ASPPH and their mentors on their progress in accomplishing their plan throughout their assignment period. At the end of the assignment, each fellow is required to submit a final report and assessment. Now, specific fellowship opportunities will be discussed in just a moment. But for now, the best person to describe a program is somebody who has experienced it. As such, we are pleased that Ed Lowe can be with us today. Ed is currently completing his first year of the ASPPH EPA Environmental Health Fellowship and is based at EPA's Office of Children's Health Protection here in Washington, D.C. Ed.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Monica. As Monica mentioned, my name is Edward Lowe. I started my fellowship a couple of months after I graduated with my master's in public health from the University of Michigan. And so far, I have to say that the fellowship has been a really great experience. It's been really amazing to be able to work on at the federal level. My host office is the Office of Children's Protection at the EPA. And the way that my fellowship has been kind of structured is the fellowship is mostly based on your independent project. So going into the fellowship, my mentor and I, we talked about possible topics that not only I'm interested in, but something that would also benefit the Office of Children's Health Protection. And so majority of my time has been working on this project, and I have the opportunity to not only talk to different people within the office about my project, but I had the opportunity to present also to different offices and people, whoever is interested in the project as well. So that's kind of like the first component of the fellowship. The other component is it's really up to you what you want to do. I've been helping a lot with the different projects that the office has been doing. And the office, it's a really kind of a smaller office compared to other EP offices, which I think is really great, really nice, because you really get to know everyone in the office. And Children's Health Protection, we work with a lot of different offices. So I'm able to learn more about these different offices within the EPA as well. For example, my mentor, she works a lot with the Toxic Substance Control Act, the TSCA Act, and all the risk evaluations they're doing with the different priority chemicals. So the office hasn't really engaged in a lot of the conversations around these assessments, which I think is really interesting. It's something you don't really get while you are at school or working somewhere else. It's really great to kind of be at the forefront of all the different work that's been going on. At our office, there's 2 other fellows as well. They started the same year as me, so it's really great to meet other people who are in the same field as you. And I think, as Malcolm mentioned, the traveling and the stipends you get for different trainings are really, really great. They've been really helpful in developing my career. So some of the trainings I've been to, when I first started, I got an opportunity to go to a risk assessment training. This was in Dallas with the EPA as well. So that training really helped me learn more about risk assessments. The stipend and training, they don't really exactly have to go with your career. It could be something that you just want to learn more about or you want to develop skills in. For example, I've been going to EPA Toastmasters meetings as well for speech help. And so the stipend can really be anything of your choosing. So overall, my experience has been great, and I encourage everyone to look more and apply to the ASPPH Fellowship. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ed. We appreciate you sharing your experience with us. And now we're going to discuss each of the ASPPH programs that have training opportunities available this year in 2021. So we're very excited to announce new fellowship opportunities that will begin in 2021 with the ASPPH CDC Public Health Fellowship Program, as well as the ASPPH EPA Environmental Health Fellowship Program. The ASPPH CDC Fellowship is currently open and accepting applications. The deadline is January 28th. The ASPPH EPA Fellowship application cycle is also open. The deadline for that is February 11th. Now, these deadlines apply to all fellowship materials. So letters of recommendation and faculty advisor verifications are also due on these dates. Now, we're going to discuss more about those in just a few minutes. Now, the question has also come up about the ASPPH NHTSA Public Health Fellowship Program and the ASPPH Public Health Philanthropy Fellowship. Now, currently, we do not have any available positions for those two programs. There is a possibility that we could have new positions arise for the ASPPH NHTSA Public Health Fellowship Program this year, but currently we do not have positions available. But if and when positions do come up, they will be announced in the ASPPH Friday letter. Now, the goal of the ASPPH CDC Public Health Fellowship Program is to identify new approaches and opportunities for field experience in which recent graduates and early career professionals with graduate degrees can practice applying skills and knowledge learned in the classroom to real public health and population health practice. Now, the program provides fellows the opportunity to train under nationally recognized experts who work to protect human health at a national and international level. Fellowship locations for this coming year are all based at CDC headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. Fellowship placements are expected to start at CDC on July 7th, 2021. The goal of the ASPPH EPA Environmental Health Fellowship Program is to provide professional training and opportunities for early career public health professionals to be involved with EPA on current and emerging environmental public health needs. The program provides fellows the opportunity to train under nationally recognized experts who work to protect human health and the environment at a national and international level. The program focuses on sustainable communities, drinking water, and public health, children's environmental health, air quality, and environmental justice. Fellowship locations are primarily in the Washington, D.C. and Research Triangle Park, North Carolina areas. However, there are occasionally opportunities open at EPA regional offices. Fellowships are expected to start on November 1st, 2021. Information regarding ASPPH fellowships is available through your career services and/or your student liaison office at your school or program of public health. In addition, you may also easily access information online, excuse me, including all application deadlines and detailed application instructions. Just go to the main page of the ASPPH website and click on the link for study at the top of the page, and then click Fellowships and Internships. You can also go directly to the Fellowships application portal where you can create an account and submit an application. Now, a great way to stay up to date about training opportunities is to subscribe to the ASPPH Friday letter. We announce all of our fellowship openings through the ASPPH Friday letter and advertise partner opportunities as well. You can sign up for the ASPPH Friday letter by going to the ASPPH website. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Erin Williams, Fellowship Manager, to talk about the application process. Erin.
Thank you, Monica. Just before we get started, before I jump into the application portal, there are a few questions in the Q&A box, and we're not ignoring them. We are going to get through the presentation itself, and then we'll jump back in and answer all the questions you have. And we'll have Mariah and Ed on so that they can answer some specific questions about actually being a fellow and applying to the program. So we see your questions, and we will get to those shortly. So to apply for a fellowship, the first thing that you're going to need to do is to create a account in the ASPPH application portal if you don't already have one. If you do already have one, you can sign in from this page. To begin, there are going to be 5 components of the application package: your CV or your resume, 2 recommendation letters, which are going to be specific to the program that you're applying to. So if you are applying to both the EPA and the CDC programs, you're going to want to make sure that those are specific to the program that you're applying to. You're going to need your graduate transcript from your school or program of public health. And for the application purposes, you may submit an official or an unofficial transcript. If you are selected for a position, at that point, you're going to have to provide your official transcript before you can begin the fellowship. You will need to complete brief essays, no more than 1,500 words, which are specific to the position to which you are applying. So if you apply to only one position, you're only going to need to submit 1 essay. But if you apply to 3 different positions, you'll need to submit 3 separate essays for those positions. You're also going to need to include your faculty advisor information. This is only for applicants who have not yet graduated or whose transcript does not show the graduation date yet. At that point, an advisor will need to verify your graduation date. And then finally, if you are not a U.S. citizen but have your permanent residency, you'll be asked to indicate that in your application. You will not be required to provide proof of residency status until you are offered a position. Both green card holders and U.S. citizens will be required to provide proof of citizenship or residency status if you are offered a position. And before we show you how to use the ASPPH application portal, I'm pleased to introduce you to Mariah Scales. Mariah is a first-year fellow with our ASPPH CDC Public Health Fellowship based at CDC's Center for Surveillance, Epidemiology, and Laboratory Services, or CSELS, in Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome, Mariah. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and welcome to everyone who's on our webinar. Thank you for taking the time out today to listen to our advice and tips. And so I'm going to go ahead and give you all tips on how to apply for an ASPPH fellowship. So of course, the first thing I would recommend is you all start early. Start as early as the application opens up, because one thing about this particular application, your recommenders won't be able to submit their recommendations until you submit your portion of the application. And so if you wait until the deadline to submit your application, your recommenders might not have enough time to upload their portion, and you don't want to be disqualified for an incomplete application. So start early, just to give yourself time. I know everyone's busy and with school and everything, and also give your recommenders time to submit their portion. So that would be the first thing. The second tip I would give is to work smarter, not harder. So I read over the essay that I submitted for my fellowship, and I realized that bits and pieces of my essay were portions of my personal statement from my graduate school application, bits and pieces from different cover letters I've written in the past. And so if you feel like, some of the things that you want to talk about in your essay is something that you've written in the past, go ahead and use a previous framework that you've yourself written. Don't use anybody else's, because we know what that is. That's not right. So use your own frame of reference and work from there. When I did that, it was just a breath of relief. You know, I didn't have to write an essay from scratch. I already had some of my thoughts written out and edited by previous editors. And so it was very easy for me to take bits and pieces that were important and then go ahead and finish fleshing that out. So I would recommend to do that. And then if you all have already looked at the application, you'll see that ASPPH provides you all with project descriptions for each fellowship position. What I did when I was applying, I printed out the particular position that I was interested in. I also printed out my resume, and I went through the project description sentence by sentence, and I highlighted the sentences where I knew I could speak to based on my previous experience. And you could talk about your previous work experience, you could talk about previous volunteer experience, you could talk about your academic experience. Just make sure when you're writing your essay, everything that you talk about aligns with the project description, as well as your future goals. The third thing, I've already talked about it, are the recommendations. So when you ask someone for a recommendation, you're going to get 3 answers. What are 3 answers? You're either going to get yes, no, or yes, but can you write it? The third one happens to me a lot. So if you have a recommender who is willing to write you a recommendation, or rather sign a recommendation that you've written about yourself, go ahead and have a shell of a recommendation stored somewhere, so you can go ahead and fill that out and provide it to your recommender with enough time for them to look over it and make any edits that they might need. Or if you don't have that, don't be afraid to ask someone else or that particular person for an example of a recommendation where you can go in and, you know, just use it as a frame of reference. That was something that I had to do for this particular application, and it worked out. So I would give that advice as well. But again, you have to start early to anticipate that if you might have to write your own recommendation. All right. And then the last 2 things I want to say, and when you're writing your essay, make sure you're stating explicitly how this opportunity is going to complement what you've already done and also set you up for your future career goals. When I wrote my essay, I talked about how participating in this fellowship would prepare me to enter into a DRPH program and prepare me for my future career endeavors. So you want to tie that in, you want to tie this fellowship into what you've done in the past to kind of show how you're a good candidate for this particular position, but then also how this position and fellowship will help you reach your future goals. And then the final tip for the essay, don't be afraid to be personal. I wrote about my experience with a drug addicted parent and how that led me to the public health field. So that was one thing that I wrote about. That's one thing that's integral to my personal public health story. And I would just recommend that, you know, your story is your story. Go ahead and get personal and let the reviewers know who you are within those 1,500 words. So those are all my tips for applying for an ASPPH fellowship. And I hope you all found it useful.
Thank you so much, Mariah. No matter what I'm doing, if I can hear from somebody that has been through that and been there, done that, and can provide, you know, their experiences, that's the most valuable thing for me.
Right.
You know, listening to all the predefined stuff. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And Mariah and Ed will be on at the end when we're doing some Q&A. Okay, so now I'm going to walk through how to use the fellowship application portal. So the first step is going to go to the ASPPH website. It's fellowships-internships.asppph.org, and you may log in or sign up for a new account directly from this page. You can also access the online application portal from the main ASPPH website by clicking onto the study tab and then the fellowships internships link. Once you have logged in, you're going to come to the home page for the ASPPH application portal. This page shows any open applications at the top, including the application deadline and a link to view that full program announcement that Monica mentioned. The program announcement is going to be the most important resource you have when applying to a fellowship or internship because it includes detailed information about that fellowship program, all of the positions, eligibility, review procedures, criteria, timelines, and how to apply. So we strongly recommend that you read through that entire program announcement before starting your application. And that'll just give you a general overview of everything we've talked about and kind of set you so there's no surprises as you're going through the process. And the homepage also is going to include some quick information and links to our additional resources, including a My Status section shown here. Once you have submitted your application, you can track the progress of the application in this section. You can also find a user's manual with step-by-step instructions on how to submit an application, and that's going to be at the bottom of the page in the resources section. You'll see here that there are 5 steps to complete and submit your application. Step 1 is going to be the My Profile page, and that's going to be where you enter your profile and contact information. Please be sure to use a permanent email address for your application, as this is going to be the email that we, ASPPH, will use to contact you about your application throughout the entire process. So if you have a school email that you're not going to have access to after you graduate, that is probably not going to be the best one to use. Step 2 is going to be My Education, and this is where you're going to enter in your degree information and upload your resume and your transcript. So note that in the application system, you may upload that unofficial graduate transcript that I mentioned earlier for the purpose of the application. And again, if you're offered and accept a fellowship position, that'll be when we require you to provide an official graduate transcript. In addition, when you enter in your graduation date, if it has not yet occurred, you'll be directed to enter that faculty advisor information we mentioned. So when you submit your application, the system is going to generate an email to your faculty advisor asking him or her to verify your expected graduation date. Just be sure to talk to your faculty advisor before the application deadline so that they are aware and are going to be prepared to respond. We don't want there to be any hiccups in getting your application confirmed and processed just because somebody wasn't aware that they needed to respond. Please note that that email to your faculty advisor will not be sent out until you actually submit your application for the first time. So it is not a good idea to submit your application for the first time on that due date. If you do plan to submit your final application on the due date, you should enter in all of that faculty advisor information before then, submit the application in order to generate that email to your responders to be sent to your faculty advisor, and then you can go back and click the pencil icon to continue working on your application. But remember, you're going to need to resubmit by the deadline. Step 3 is My Application, and this is where you'll select the positions you're applying to, upload your essays, as well as enter in the information for your references. You will see a list of open positions for the program to which you're applying on this page, and if you're not sure which positions you want to apply to, there's going to be a link to that program announcement we mentioned at the top of the page, which includes details about each and every position that we have open. You apply to the position you're interested in by uploading an essay to that position. You may apply to a maximum of 3 positions under each fellowship program. So 3 for EPA, 3 for CDC, what have you, whichever positions you're interested in. And the system will not allow you to upload more than 3 essays. The reference section at the bottom of the page is where you will enter the contact information for those 2 people who have agreed to write your letters of recommendation. There isn't any restrictions on who you may request to be your reference, but they should be people who can speak to your personal experience, your qualifications for the program you're applying to. And when you submit your application, again, the system will automatically generate an email to each of your references asking them to submit their letter of recommendation. As with the faculty advisor, Please be sure to speak to your references as well before the application deadline so that they are prepared to respond. Also, as with that faculty advisor section, the email to your recommenders will not be sent until you submit your applications for the first time. So once again, don't submit it for the first time on the due date. If you plan to submit your final application on the due date, please remember to enter the recommendations information before then, submit the application in order to prompt those auto-generated emails to be sent, and then click on the pencil icon to continue working on your application. And then just remember to resubmit before the application deadline. Also, important to note, the system will not send reminders to the references or faculty advisors. It will be your responsibility to ensure that all of those required elements are submitted by the deadline. And then in step 4, you will review your entire application. If you need to make any changes, you just click on that pencil icon next to the section you want to revise, and it'll take you back to that section to make any necessary changes. And then the final step to submit your application is step 5. Check the box to electronically sign your application and then hit the submit button. When your application is successfully submitted, you will receive a confirmation email. The system will automatically generate those emails to your references, your faculty advisor, if applicable. Please note that saving the application with the information will not generate the emails. Again, you must hit the submit button for this to happen. I think we've mentioned that about 1,000 times now, so I think you've got that point. And as mentioned earlier, your faculty advisor and references must also complete their sections by the deadline. Do not wait until that last day to submit your application because they won't have time to submit everything that they need to submit before the deadline. And then once you've submitted your application, you can go back in, make any changes you need from the homepage by clicking on the pencil icon. As long as you resubmit by the application deadline, your application will be reviewed. This is a good option if you want those references and faculty advisor to get the email, but you're still working on your essay or your resume or, just fine tuning things. Just remember that if you do resend it, you must resubmit or your application will not be reviewed. ASPPH cannot accept any incomplete applications. This includes missing information or submissions from your references or your faculty advisor. So the application deadline is also the deadline for them to submit their documents. Once the deadline has passed, ASPPH will review all applications for completeness and eligibility, and we'll update your status in the system when your application has been verified and moved along to the review stage. You may view your application status at any time when you logged into the system, and the system will automatically send you an email update with any change in status. I will now turn the presentation back over to Monica to go over how that review process is conducted. Monica.
Great, thank you, Erin. ASPPH ensures that all eligible completed applications submitted by the deadline will be reviewed in an open, fair, and objective process. Now, each application is reviewed by 2 faculty or staff members from ASPPH member institutions, but not from the same institution as the applicant. Now, applications are scored according to criteria noted in the program announcement, and the top applicants progress to the next phase, or the technical review. During this time, applicants may be contacted for interviews directly by the agency. Now, moving on to the technical review phase does not guarantee that an applicant will receive an interview, only that the application has been sent to the placement agency for review. Now, it's possible that not all applicants in the technical review phase will receive interviews. In addition, this is important, for the ASPPH EPA Fellowship Program, the next step is a formal in-person panel interview. Now, this actually happens in between the objective and the technical review phase. It's an additional element specifically for the program at the EPA. Now, these interviews will be held virtually via Zoom in mid-April. All applicants who advance to this stage are required to participate in the panel interview in order to be considered for placement. Now, the top applicants from the interviews will then progress to the final technical review phase at the EPA. Individuals selected for positions with each program will be contacted directly by ASPPH via phone and email. Those applicants who are not selected will be notified by ASPPH by email. The timeline for each program varies. You can refer to our website and the program announcement for the specific program you're interested in to review the important dates for the program in which you are applying. Now that ends the formal presentations. We will now open the lines for questions, and please click the button again at the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type your question into the box. I'm going to be directing your questions to one of today's speakers, and we currently have a good amount of time to take questions. So we have about 25 minutes left in the program, so we'll address as many questions as possible. I'll start. So the question came up again about international students and residency. So because these programs are funded by federal dollars, so the programs are funded specifically by the CDC and the EPA, their requirements are, in order to take advantage of the opportunities, you must be a US citizen or a permanent resident of the United States, i.e. have a green card. So if you are not a citizen or do not currently hold a United States green card, unfortunately, you are not eligible to apply for the program. In those cases, as I mentioned earlier, there are other programs at federal agencies that do have some expanded eligibility and will take applicants who are not US citizens or permanent residents. You can find that information directly on the CDC website, for example, or the EPA website. Other fellows can find opportunities at HHS or other federal agencies. So definitely do a little research and look for those opportunities that are open to non-US citizens or permanent residents. In addition, I encourage you to talk to your career services offices. Excuse me. Your schools do a great job in collecting information that is useful for their students and offer just a wealth of information for you, and will have other opportunities for which you are likely to be eligible. So take advantage of that. So there's also a request that if some of the presenters could share what type of experience you had before entering the fellowship and what made you qualified to be selected for the fellowships. So Mariah, why don't we start with you and then we'll go to Ed.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I had a lot of different experience. I really didn't get into the public health field until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So a lot of the experience that I did have wasn't necessarily public health related. One thing I did do though, as I mentioned earlier, was just going through the project description and figuring out what skills that I have and experiences that I have matched up to the particular position that I was applying to. So I could talk about, like, for my graduate experience, I had to complete a practicum, which is, I guess, like a fancy word for an internship. And for my practicum, I was a graduate research assistant for a reproductive justice organization here in Atlanta. And as a graduate research assistant, I worked on a community-based research project called Georgia Access to Medication Abortion. And it was a qualitative community-based research project. And we explored Black and Latinx women's experiences with accessing medication abortion. So I had research in that realm. And then before that, I participated in another piece of community research that analyzed the development of the Atlanta Beltline. The Atlanta Beltline is a bike trail, basically, that goes around the circumference of the city. And we analyzed how the development of the Beltline also contributed to gentrification and the displacement of low-income individuals in Atlanta. So I had those two types of experiences. I don't think I talked about, I know I talked about my graduate research assistantship during my essay, but I don't think I talked about my housing affordability research experience. So again, just go through the project description and really figure out like what experiences that you have that highlight what make you qualified for the position. And the other part of your question, like what made us qualify, I'm not sure. I would love to know who like went over my application and what that was, how that was. But just make sure on your end you demonstrate how your previous experiences align with the job announcement and how this particular opportunity is going to help you with your future endeavors.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mariah. Ed, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I agree with Mariah, what she said. Really tailoring your application to the specific fellowship position you want. For me, I did have some research experience in graduate school. I was part of a research project that looked at heat vulnerability in Detroit communities. So that was really helpful in kind of making my resume towards the EPA specifically. That makes sense. I think when I was applying, one thing they were really interested in, the Office of Children's Health Protection, was another project I did in school as well, looking at chemicals in toys. So that was really something they were interested in, and something that they've been doing in the office. So I think if you're really able to connect what you've learned, your previous experiences, kind of really being like specific about what you've been doing and your passions, then I think that's the best way to approach your application.
Thank you so much to you both. Great information, very helpful for the applicants. We have a question here about if somebody who received a JD 10 years ago, would they need to complete more recent master's degree in order to qualify for a fellowship? So there are two things here to address. First of all, unfortunately, a JD does not qualify. In order to be eligible for the program, it must be a master's or a doctorate degree from an ASPPH member, CEPH accredited school or program of public health. So a law degree will not be eligible. It needs to be a degree from a school or program of public health, specifically an ASPPH member school or program of public health. The second part of that is that the degree must have been received within the prior 5 years. So if you received your degree more than 5 years ago, unfortunately, you will no longer be eligible. And you must also have, if you're still in school, you must have received the degree by the time you start the fellowship. So for example, with CDC, you must have your degree by July. And for the EPA program, you must have your degree by the fall. So moving on to the next question, is there any possibility that additional fellowship positions through the ASPPH CDC Fellowship with placements outside of Atlanta will be available this year? Currently, the two programs work a little differently. With the CDC program, we know now. So you can go online and see exactly what positions are available with that program. And all 5 of the current available opportunities are all based in Atlanta. Now, there are some occasions, for example, last year, we had positions for fellows who just started this last July. We have one fellow who's based at NIOSH in Spokane, Washington, and another fellow who's based at NIOSH in Morgantown, West Virginia. We've also had fellows who are based at NIOSH in Pittsburgh, at NCHS here in the Washington, D.C. area, in Hyattsville. We also have 2 fellows who are currently placed through the CDC program who are based at HHS here in Washington, D.C. So it does happen, but as of right now, currently for the CDC program, all of the current positions are based in Atlanta. Now, with our EPA program, it works a little differently. We will not know what offices are accepting or who are bringing on a new fellow until much later in the process. So That typically will not happen until you go through the technical review phase at EPA. So we're looking at that probably won't happen until May. And so at that time, if you are interviewed, if you make it through the panel interview process and are selected to be a finalist to go on to technical review, if you receive interviews from offices at EPA, at that point, they will be able to tell you, okay, we're interviewing you for this particular position in the Office of Research and Development based in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, or in Washington, DC, or whatever one of the regional offices they might be based in. So you will not find out where locations are based at until much later in the process. So it does work a little differently. But as again, more specifically to the question, currently all fellowships opportunities with the CDC will be in Atlanta, Georgia this year. So moving forward, oops, sorry. So what is the best time to apply? I'm a freshman doing an MPH, expected to graduate in June 2022. So you currently are not eligible. So we would actually push back your application. We would not accept it because you have to apply within that window. So within 5 years after you graduate, but so that you're applying for a spot that that you'll be able to start immediately after you've received it. So you must have already received. So you can't, we won't look at applications if you're not going to be graduating until next year. So I do encourage you to come back and apply to fellowship programs next cycle. So basically 1 year from now for fellowship opportunities that will begin in the summer and fall of 2022. So another question regarding the MS PhD from a School of Public Health. Would you consider a biotechnology MS from a School of Public Health with or without a certificate in public health? So the CPH is, to address the CPH matter first, we prefer, there is a preference given to applicants who currently hold their CPH. However, it is not a requirement. Now, it would depend on your School of Public Health. So going back earlier to what we had, what I mentioned, it depends on if that particular degree is accredited by CEPH. Now, if it's a degree conferred by a School of Public Health, then all the degrees conferred within a School of Public Health are CEP accredited and they would be eligible. If you attend a program of public health, it would be case by case because not all degrees conferred by a program of public health are accredited by CEP. So your degree must be one of the degrees that is specifically accredited by CEP in order to be eligible for the program, or for the fellowship program. Again, our master's degree in public health from UK universities considered for the fellowship. Only if it had come from an ASPPH member. There was a point in time where the London School was a member of CEP of ASPPH. That's not currently the case. We do have members, for example, in Mexico, as well as Taiwan. And if you are a U.S. citizen who happened to attend one of the international schools that's also a member of ASPPH, you would be eligible. But remember, all those things need to come together and merge. So your school must be a member of ASPPH, and you must be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident of the United States in order to be eligible. So there's a question about rolling admissions, or will every applicant be reviewed and considered after the deadline? There are no rolling admissions. You must submit all your application materials by the deadline. All applications are considered together during that particular cycle for the year. There's one caveat to that. There are some times, for example, this just happened recently, where opportunities come up during the course of a fellowship year and fellowship positions are left vacant. So for example, a couple of months ago, 2 of our fellows at CDC were hired on as full-time employees, which left their 2 positions open and vacant. Those offices wanted to fill those positions sooner rather than later. So what we did is we tapped into the pool of applicants from last year. So there were folks who applied to the program, who went through the entire application process successfully, made it to the technical review phase, but unfortunately weren't able to find a match at that point in time. We held on to their application materials and tapped into that pool of applicants, and were able to very quickly and easily fill those 2 new positions that came up using that same pool of applicants. So we will always maintain a pool of applicants from the prior year's applications, just in case something like that would happen again. Okay, so we have a question again from Mariah and Ed. The question is, what kind of research experience did you have prior to applying to the fellowship? Now, I know you've touched on that a little bit already in your previous responses. So if you want to elaborate on that, you can, or you might want to talk about how your experience has directly influenced the type of projects you're currently working on. So why don't we start with Ed?
Sure, thanks for the question. I kind of touched about my research experience, but I think that maybe just comparing my experience with others, I don't think I have that much research experience besides the one I had in my graduate program. I didn't really do any in undergrad. So I think you don't necessarily need research experience in order to apply to at least EPA fellowships. I think if you're able to kind of demonstrate through your schoolwork and whatever other strengths you have, it doesn't have to be researched, and I think that will really benefit you. So I don't know if Mariah wants to add to that.
Yes, I can add to that. So with my particular fellowship, my title is called Enhancing the Public Health Informatics Workforce. And so basically my fellowship is really projects based. I have 3 projects that I'm working on, and none of them really to do with research per se. Like I do a little bit of research about emerging trends in data science, because that's what my team works on. There are a lot of data scientists, and reporting that back out to my teammates to make sure, you know, we are implementing and incorporating new trends and emerging breakthroughs in the field of data science. But yeah, as Edward was saying, that you don't really need to have extensive research to apply. And from what I'm hearing from other members in my cohort, their fellowship is projects based too. So it's more so about what you can execute, what you can plan, what you can accomplish. And if you can tie in your research experience, you know, you have to make a research question. You have to design your research. You have to actually conduct the research, and then you report your findings out. I do those things in my job where I'm searching for things, I'm synthesizing information, and I'm reporting that back out to my teammates and presenting that to external stakeholders as well. So in that sense, I would say and best practices from research kind of play into my work, but it's not at the forefront, or it's not integral to the projects that I'm doing in my fellowship right now. So I hope that provided more information.
Great. Thank you both, Mariah and Ed. And I'm going to throw it back to you again. There's a question about touching on some of what, Mariah, you talked about in your presentation. They're asking about the interview process, how the interview process went with you, each of you, and any additional tips. So Mariah, why don't you go ahead and take it, and then we'll go to Ed.
Absolutely. So once you submit your application, you'll learn if you move on to the next round, and then you'll learn if you receive it, if you're extended the opportunity to interview. So with every interview, I always get nervous. Like I was pacing around my room and, you know, make sure my background was clean and I was clean and looking good for the Zoom interview, because at this time, the pandemic had already reached the US and things were closed down. And when I logged into my interview, the camera was off for my interviewer who ended up being my mentor for my fellowship. And it was a very casual conversation, just getting to know each other more, talking about why I'm interested in the position, of course, and what I'm hoping to get out of the position. And of course, you always have questions for your interviewer, so make sure you do that. And I just didn't feel like it was as intense as an interview might have been in other times because it was online, it was through Skype. And one thing at the CDC, they don't really like cameras, so it was off. So that was even more relaxing because it was just more so focused on what I had to say and what I had to offer. I only had one interview and I think it lasted about 45 minutes. And it was a standard behavioral interview, asking questions about me, what I'm interested in, what would you do if you were in X, Y, and Z situation, how would you handle it? So I would say go ahead, and if you are extended an opportunity to interview, set up time with one of your mentors or one of your friends to have a mock interview that goes over, basic behavioral questions, or even them asking questions about your particular resume. So you already have practiced how to speak to your own accomplishments. You yourself need to go over your resume so you can talk to your own accomplishments. In your cover letter, read over your essay again to make sure if there's anything that you want to re-highlight in the interview. I think those are all the tips I can offer. But if the interview is like anything I experienced, just take a deep breath, breathe, and just remember you made it this far based on what you've already accomplished. They're already interested in you, so just go ahead and seal the deal, and speak to your accomplishments and your experiences.
Great advice. Thank you, Mariah. And Ed, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with Mariah. This was before the pandemic, but mine was still a call. It wasn't in person. So I believe most of the people in OCHIP were there. It was, I don't exactly remember how many people, but it was a group of people, and they each asked a question. I think my mentor, she asked the most questions. So I think they decide on who the mentor is going to be for this fellow. So she was, from what I remember, she was really interested in the chemicals and toys project. So I think if you're just really prepared in your projects, then you should really be fine. I wouldn't be nervous. Like Maria said, it's a casual conversation, and I think they really, at the end of the day, want to know why you want to be a fellow. And if you're able to express that, then I think you're in really good shape. I would also do some research on the office that you're applying to. I think that really helps if you know what they're doing, and you can ask questions from there as well.
Thank you, Ed. And so to reiterate two of the things that Mariah and Ed said, first of all, as Mariah mentioned, make sure that you have questions prepared. That's a very important element, so that, and make sure they're tied into research that you've done. So as Ed just recommended, do your homework. Make sure you go online and pull up information on the office that is going to be interviewing you. You will know that. If you know the people with whom you're going to be interviewing, Google them. Find out what type of research they've done, what interests them, what their background is. Typically, folks are pretty impressed if you can, cite a research paper that they worked on. So definitely do your homework on the background of not just the agency overall, but that specific office, and more specifically, the people with whom you're going to be interviewing. So we're almost at time. I'm going to address just one last question quickly. The question about internships has come up, or summer practicums. Unfortunately, as of right now, ASPPH does not plan on having any summer internships in 2021. The fact is, because of the uncertainties of the pandemic, hopefully, by the summer, the vaccine will be pretty widespread, but we don't know for sure how that's going to play out. And of course, with internships, it's really important because because of the brevity of internships, they're typically only 10 to 12 weeks. It's really important that they're able to be done in person for the entire duration of the internship. Whereas fellows, we can make up for it because there's a longer period to train, but because of the uncertainties, we have not identified any internship opportunities for the summer of 2021 this year. So unfortunately, we're not able to do that, but hopefully we'll get back to normal later in 2021, and in 2022, we will be able to offer summer internships. But alas, with that brings us to time. So I'd like to say thank you very much, particularly to both Ed and Mariah for sharing their experiences and information with all of us today, and also to my colleague, Erin Williams. So this concludes our presentation for today. Keep in mind, we will run this webinar again on January 7th. So if any of your friends, fellow students, colleagues missed today's presentation, it will be recorded and available online, but we will also be doing another live presentation on January 7th. I don't know if I accidentally said July, but it will be January 7th after the new year. So with that, I bid you adieu. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a happy holiday season. Bye-bye.